museum back to life.
You know, people sit out on the front porch hoping people will come by.
Go forth and do good. It's insane. I have the most understanding wife in the world.
I treat everybody the same thing.
Oh, that's the other thing I love about Marietta. It's like a melting pot.
You are listening to Marietta Stories. Each week, veteran podcaster Bill Nowicki brings you the heartwarming, interesting, and fun stories from the people that make the community of Marietta, Georgia, a place to call home. Here's your host, Bill Nowicki. Welcome to this episode of Marietta Stories Podcast. I have Amy Reed, the director of the Marietta History Museum. She has a passion for history. She has a passion for our community. She wasn't born in Marietta, but she's a Cobb County native. You will love this interview, and she's one of many people in Marietta that are young, vibrant, getting things done, and changing the way we experience Marietta City. And next week is no exception. I have Taylor Rambo from the Georgia Symphony. You're really going to enjoy that interview. It's amazing. But this week, it's Amy Reed, and thanks for listening. Tell a couple friends about the show, and let's get started with Miss Amy Reed. So I have Amy Reed, the new director of the Marietta Museum of History, and we're in the, was this the press room, would you say?
Sure. This is the Oval Office. No, this is our small conference room.
Wow, it's exciting to meet with you. I guess this is your first real interview, I guess?
I guess so. Yeah. As I think about it, it's been a whirlwind, so I'm not really, I haven't really slowed down and changed gears or anything. We'll just keep moving forward like we have. So
yeah, let's talk about what you think the future holds. And Christa is standing in the background taking videos or something, I suspect. But
better not be.
What do you think, Christa, of this decision?
I was the first one to say, yes, go for it, do it. We've been together for 17 years, so if I trust anybody, it's her. And she's going to lead us down this great path that I'm super excited about. And I'm going to be first one behind her saying, let's go, let's do it. Yeah. But I will have to sometimes bring her head down out of the clouds. But that's what I'm here for. She's the creative one, and then I'm the one that says, all right, how are we going to do it?
Right.
That's how we work.
Sounds like sounds like a great team. So what's your creative ideas, Amy?
Oh boy, there's so much. I mean, we've got so many new things. Especially, timing is good because coming out of COVID and pandemic, well, hopefully coming out. Of course, we know that's a whole nother conversation. Just with timing, it's a great time to refresh and come out as something new and remind everybody in the community that we're here, that we are the center of all things Marietta history. You can't have historic Marietta without us. Really, you can't. So.
Right. Yeah, and I love the new exhibit you have because it. So many times old school museums is all about, let's be honest, white history.
Right. Yeah.
And about your new exhibit, why don't you talk a little bit about how you came upon that and what's it all about?
I'll step in for a minute because she was more involved with actually getting the photographs, and then I can talk a little bit more how we curated and focused the exhibit on diverse history. So.
All right, Christa.
So we always wonder, Amy and I, what is out there of Marietta history that we just don't know about? And this was one of those things. These negatives were in a lawyer's office in New York, and it was one of those...
New York City?
Actually, no, like the other part of New York, like upstate New York, like
rest of New York,
the rest of the place. So they were cleaning out one of the law partners' basements, and they found this box, and they saw these negatives. Assistants started scanning them, and they didn't really know what they were. And then they saw this one that said Kennesaw House on it, and they Googled it. They found us, and they contacted us, and they're like, would you like these? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And we got them first digitally, and Amy had the chance to see them first. And she's literally texting me these pictures going, oh my gosh, look at these pictures. These are great. And I came in the next day, I had the pictures. And within an hour, I had the date, the year date. We knew the photographer already, knew the event, or found the event, and we were off and running at the races. So
it was 1899, if I remember correctly. But what was the event, and how did the photographer get here, and all that?
So the photographer, James Shaw, came down to Marietta in April of 1899 to visit his brother, who was working at one of the chair factories. So while he was here, the major event that he was photographing, I was something different, but photographing was Memorial Day, 1899. But at that point, they called it Federal Memorial Day. And being from New York, and actually Amy and I realized he probably was from the town that claims to have had the first Memorial Day. Nearby, it was nearby, yeah.
Yeah, nearby. There's actually, come to find out, a couple of towns that claim to have the first. So, and there's some that unofficially, there's a lot of African American communities that claim to have had the first, but it's not been, officially designated. So we don't know who technically had the first.
Yeah, so he came down here and he photographed that event. He photographed his brother's house, which that house was on Kennesaw Avenue and it doesn't exist anymore. So we love those kind of things. And the other events or places around town, he ended up, one picture that's not out on display that we have is he took a picture of Senator Alexander Stevens Clay house on Atlanta Street. And Amy and I are like, well, why would you take a picture of it? But he was a celebrity. Like, what do people do? They go and find whoever the famous person is. So we have a picture of that house. And James Shaw ended up passing away in late June of that same year from, was it typhoid fever? Yeah. Which Amy was the one that was able to figure out all of that. So you have this tiny 2-month window in this beautiful snapshot of Marietta that, Amy and I still look at these pictures and just go, wow.
See more and more each time you look. But
we literally have not even had these pictures for a year. We got them digitally, but now we actually have the hard copies too, the actual negatives. But Amy and I both said, this is a gold mine. We have to show this. Yeah. We can't wait.
And why are there so many African Americans in the federal holiday picture?
Amy can explain that one better with her research. I gave her the starting point. I said, here.
You shoved her like you did with this new job.
I did. That's.
Pushes me into
I know she's got bruises on.
I know. Sure. Well, no, but that's how, as collections manager and curator, that kind of relationship that we had, Christa handles the collections and the actual, getting the stuff and the formality of it and the legality of it and all of that. And then it would be up to me when I was the curator, which I still am, by the way. But
2 jobs, picked up a job.
Yeah, I just picked an extra one up. And then it's my job to figure out how to present it to the public. So for those who don't know what this is, just to, the title is Marietta 1899, color captured in black and white, because it truly is a representation. All of these photographs are a representation of Marietta in all of its color. And by color, I mean skin tones. I mean African Americans and whites all together around town. And of course, captured in black and white photographs. The reality is the majority of photographs that were taken back then at that time were of white families. When photographers came to town, they would promote their services to white families, or even families that were taking photographs were primarily taking them, financially, the white families would have had more funds available, more, just more access to photographers. So not to say that African Americans did not have their photos taken. They did. They have plenty of photos. However, because of the nature of, our world in the last 2 centuries, the trust to present and share their precious family stories and photographs with a white community that, wanted to segregate it and demean it and, completely tear them apart, who would trust that with someone? That's understandable. And that's a generation, it'll take generations for that to go away because, along with other issues in that respect. As far as photographs and artifacts go, it's so important that we have these now, that we can share these images of African Americans during that time, because even if they're out there, we've never seen them. And one of my goals here, you asked earlier what some of our plans were. I've been working for a couple of years on diversifying our collections and our exhibits and our programming. That's always a continued path that we're moving towards, really pushing it out there that these things are there and we want to share, we want to share them.
Looking for something fun to do? How about axe throwing? My friend Dan Fisher down at American Axes has the safest, best place to go in Marietta to throw axes. They even have a mobile unit that can trailer out to your location. American Axes is off of Franklin Gateway along with Go Forth Goods and Schoolhouse Brewing. In fact, they'll bring beer over to you from Schoolhouse while you're throwing those axes. I've been there several times, both from people from work and other friends, and everybody loved it, even the hesitant ones. Takes a few minutes to learn. They have great coaches, and you'll love it. Make your reservations today at american-axes.com. Make sure to select Marietta Stories Podcast when you say how you heard about them.
Also, check out their new Atlanta location.
You know, when John Sylvie reached out to me to be a sponsor of Marietta Stories Podcast, I jumped at the chance. I love the guy. He's a humanitarian. He's a small business owner. He's a franchise owner, and he cares so much about Marietta. I got him on the show last year. I was not disappointed. He works hard every day. He only sleeps like 3 to 4 hours a day. Why? Because he's got a lot to do to make Marietta better. And he does a lot right at the Zaxby's. 591 South Marietta Parkway. Go check it out and tell him Bill Nowicki sent you.
So when we got these photographs, obviously, like Christa said, it was a gold mine, and it shows Federal Memorial Day, which was May 31st, 1899. It was a holiday at that point that had been celebrated in other parts of the country, like New York, where he was from, because it's basically, celebrating the Union soldiers, as well as Revolutionary and so forth, but Union soldiers and African Americans were, of course, adopted that holiday as a symbol of their freedom. Back then, most white citizens in Cobb County in Georgia would have celebrated Confederate Memorial Day. I mean, the obvious reason is because that's what their ancestors and their parents, even at that point, their parents would have been participating in as Confederates. There were plenty of Confederate soldiers still alive at that time, so they would have been honoring them. So that's kind of why at that time period, the main focus was on the Confederate Memorial Day. But, of course, as we all know, here in Marietta, we have a national cemetery. And that was established in 1866, right after the war, the Civil War, when they had thousands of bodies, around Cobb County that they needed to. At the time, after battles, they often they'll just bury them where they lay, kind of, a thing. But they really wanted to pull them together, and so that's a whole nother story. I think you've probably interviewed Brad Quinlan before. Have you done that? Oh, he can tell you the whole story of the National Cemetery. Long story short, we've got this amazing national cemetery that honors the Union dead. That's why Marietta was the place for this celebration. So a lot of the people that are in our photographs, they were coming from all over Marietta.
Here comes the train. It's literally 8 feet from us, but I think this is such a part of Marietta. We're gonna leave that in. All right.
You can't do business without a train. It is.
Wouldn't be what we are today.
That's right. That's who we are. It's in your intro. So people from all over, not just Marietta, but actually all over the North Georgia area came to Marietta for this celebration. So a lot of the people, and actually a lot of the photographs are at the train station, because a lot of them are coming and going from other places around North Georgia, or maybe even all of Georgia, to Marietta specifically for this day. So in the photographs, you'll see them getting off at the train station. You'll see them, they had a parade around the square with a band. They had a picnic on the grounds, so they set up tables, white tablecloths, and many of them are in their finest dresses. I mean, they are all done up and having a beautiful picnic all over the square on all four sides. And then they all marched out to the National Cemetery, where they then had speakers up on the podium there. You see the old podium that was there. There are remnants of that podium still at our National Cemetery today. It's a pergola now. It's got vines growing on it. So then, so you'll see them as a crowd listening to people give speeches. And then, like Christa was saying, there's also photographs of scenes around the Marietta Square, just in general, what the storefronts looked like. You're interested in a photograph that, has some oxen laying around, and I mean, that was normal, They're just hanging out in the shade while, people do their business in town. Got one photograph that, it's the last known photograph of the courthouse as it looked in 1899, because shortly after, a couple months after this photograph was taken, it was completely redesigned, the outside of the courthouse. There's just so many things. There are photographs of Kennesaw Mountain. They took an excursion or excursions around the mountain on bicycles. So you see early versions of people bicycling around, which was a huge deal back then. There's two photographs in particular of a tower, a viewing tower or observation tower on top of Kennesaw Mountain. And I sent them over to my colleagues over at the park, the rangers over there, and I asked them to help identify them, and we did identify that they were from the park, but they weren't quite sure where, and they had never heard of an observation tower. They had no idea that happened. Well, I was able to confirm that it was in fact there through the Marietta Daily Journal archives. At that exact year, they're promoting it and trying to get people to go look at the observation tower. So here we have photographs of this thing that no one even knew about. I just heard that the Marietta Pilgrimage is going to be focusing on Kennesaw Avenue this year. I don't know if that's top secret or not. I hope it's not. But it's not my job to keep it a secret. But the house that we have photographs of is an old historic home that's no longer there. So, that'll hopefully tie in with their, some of their plans, just showing something that's not there. But yeah, the whole gist of it is a continuation of sharing a diverse history of our community, because our community is so incredibly diverse, and that's not anything new. It always has been. Always has been. We have to share that, and we have to show it. And right now, the best way to do that is through photographs. My goal is to increase our archives with more diversity as far as artifacts go and donations. That's an ongoing process that we'll continue with.
Cool. Yeah. And for context, when did Jim Crow start in Georgia? So was that, because you do see different races together in the train depot and things.
Well, true, but you have to understand Jim Crow, the concept, the actual years are all, you could argue that it started right after the Civil War, immediately with emancipation. The mixing of the races, it's not like when we say the world was segregated, that doesn't mean that blacks and whites never mixed. They were constantly working together, sometimes socializing together. Granted, even while that was happening, there was an understood, underlying, one is better than separation, I'm better than you kind of a mentality. You still had, there was a community, just like today. When you go out and about and, you go to some place, you need jobs done, or they would look to the African American community for a lot of that. They were integral in the whites' everyday lives, because even just within their homes and domestic roles. And actually, that's another thing I wanted to point out that we point out in this exhibit. The photographs that we do have of African Americans, I'd say pre-1950 especially, almost 100% of them are showing African Americans in domestic roles, either domestic or labor roles. But the fact that these are photographs showing them in their lives, what's important in their lives, and their community being away from the status of a domestic, of the help, so to speak. That's what's also amazing about these photographs. But yeah, the Jim Crow South, you still had everyone, was around each other and mingling. It's just the legal, standing and the social standing was different.
Yeah. Well, I'm super excited because you and I both love podcasts, and one of the reasons we love it is it's the complicated nature of our society and the people and how we interact. And it sounds like you're ready to bring some of that to the forefront.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Like I said, I joked earlier that I'm still a curator too, but that just also means that I'm going to continue with programs that I had been working on for the past couple of years with our Diverse Cobb Advisory Committee. We had to shut that down during COVID, and I'm planning to bring that back to help keep me in line with where we need to be going. I'm not going to tell people their history. I'm not going to tell Black history because that's not something I have personal experience with. I'm going to listen to what I should be telling about Black history. And that's where the advisory committee really comes in and helps me in all aspects of the museum in that respect. We're also looking forward to incorporating more Latinx history. It's relatively fresh and new in Cobb County. Really, once we started doing the research, you really didn't see those communities starting to bloom here until maybe the late 70s or 80s. But it's still history. It's important to document that. Also, LGBTQ history, we're looking at that. So all varieties of history.
Well, I'm super excited, and you guys are great. I mean, all the fun stuff you do, but there's still that caring and your honoring of folks here in Marietta, and I sure appreciate what you do every day.
Well, I absolutely love it. It is my passion. I've thrown my heart and soul into this place and this community for 20 years. I am a native of Cobb County, but, I was up from Kennesaw and Ackworth. That's the other side of the tracks, if you ask OMs. It is my community. It's a passion. I love it. So.
Best of luck in the new job.
Thank
Congratulations.
You. Thank you. We're all excited.
All right. Thanks once more to Amy Reed at the Marietta History Museum. You can find them on Depot Road right there on the square. Check it out. The new exhibit's really cool. I got a picture from it. And next week we have Taylor Rambo from the Georgia Symphony. It's young and vibrant, just got started. You're going to love that interview too. This is Bill Nowicki saying thanks for listening to Marietta Stories Podcast.